In today's episode, we're going to talk about how to use your podcast to build authority and become the go-to expert in your industry. The person your ID client hires isn't always the most skilled. It's the one they know, the one they've heard speak, the one who shows up consistently. The podcast makes you that person. Today, I'm going to show you how to use podcasting to position yourself as the authority in your industry. So first, I want us to look at the authority equation. Now, stay with me here. I know I talked about an equation, but stay with me. It's a very simple equation. It's visibility plus value plus consistency equals authority. Visibility plus value plus consistency equals authority. So now I'll explain what each of those words mean. In order to be an authority, you have to be visible. Okay? Yeah, okay. In order to be considered an authority. Now, you could be an authority in your own, you could be an expert. Let's use the word. You could be an expert. But in order to be an authority, you have to be visible. Because what will happen is that no one sees you, no one knows you, so there's really no authority. Okay? Now, visibility, that's showing up, being seen. There are a lot of brands, there are a lot of people that they show up, but they don't have authority, even though they are visible, because there is no value. What commands authority is the fact that by giving value, let's say I tell you, change, do this thing to get guests in 5 minutes, and you do the thing and you get guests in 5 minutes, or you do the thing and you get more downloads. Guess what happens? You've seen me, I've given you value, and you kind of say, wow, this guy knows his stuff, this guy, kind of trust this guy. And then the next thing that shows up is consistency. It's not enough to show up, to give value. You have to show up, give value, and do it consistently. And sooner or later, you become an authority in the industry. Now, a podcast checks all three boxes simultaneously. First reason why I say that is that with podcasting, a lot of people do not stay consistent. Now, that's a good thing. Now, it's not like it's a good thing for that they don't stay consistent, but it's a good thing because it means the bar is very, very low. And if you start a podcast and you are consistent year after year, guess what? That's the consistency part. And with the podcast, of course, each episode you're giving value. That's the value part of the equation. And with visibility, you're promoting your podcast, you're getting in front of people listening to your podcast. And that's visibility plus value plus consistency. And then you become an authority. Now, the problem is that a lot of podcasters, two parts of the equation, they are not visible. Nobody knows that they have a podcast. They show up consistently. They provide value, but nobody knows about their podcast. They don't do promotion. They don't put it out there, and nobody considers them an authority. The other part is consistency. Most podcasts, they show up when they like, there is no system in place. And when they're tired, when they're sick, they can't show up on their podcast. They can't produce their podcast. They can't show up consistently. So they can't be considered authority. They do a podcast, 6 months, they're gone, 1 year, they're gone. And then they say, oh, yeah, that's right. I used to have a podcast. Let's drop another episode. Right? So the visibility plus value plus consistency equals authority. A podcast checks all three boxes simultaneously. Now, let's look at why podcasting builds authority faster than any other medium. The depth over the breadth. A read gives you 30 seconds. A blog gives you 5 minutes of reading. It doesn't even get up to 5 minutes. Most people just skim it. A podcast gives you 30 to 60 minutes of uninterrupted thought leadership. And the thing is, the more time people spend with you, the more value you offer, the more people kind of trust you and have this parasocial relationship where they feel like they already know you. And then when they see you in life, they say, hey, hi, I know you. Right? And it's like they feel you like you're already a friend. Right? The intimacy factor, you're literally in their ears, right? It's the most personal form of content. Listeners feel like they know you, they know your voice. Okay, that's one. There's depth over breadth. The second one is the intimacy factor. The third one is the borrowed authority. Now, when you interviewed respected guests, their credibility transfers to you. When they share the episode, their audience discovers you. Two things. When you interview respected guests, their credibility transfers to you. When you share the episode, the audience discovers you. Now, the two parts, and I'll explain what I mean by the credibility transfers to you. If I invited someone like Seth Godin, or who's a marketing guy in the industry, I'm trying to think of a marketing guy, Robert Cardini, or why can't I think of a market guy? But Seth Godin, right? If I interview him on my podcast, people who know Seth Godin to be an authority, they're going to see me and say, wow, this guy, right? It will rub off on me like, oh wow, this guy is talking. These are the kind of people he's talking to. And so if he's talking to this kind of people, he too is that kind of people. Yeah, I know that. I don't know what the English is, but you get what I'm saying. Okay. And then the audience discovers you. Most times people just reach out to guests because of the audience discovers you. That's not enough. When the audience discovers you, they promote it. And even though to do not promote it, if you are in an industry, there are people that people in that industry would recognize. An example would be if I was into marketing, the people that I would know. And if I see a random podcast from nowhere a random guy who has a podcast on marketing, and I see two, three names that I know in the industry, I'm like, okay, yeah, this guy knows his stuff. Okay, so that's in the borrowed authority. The next one is the content compound effect, right? Now, 50 episodes, it's equals to a library of expertise that lives forever. When someone discovers your show, they binge. That's 50 hours of your best thinking available on demand. Okay, so we've seen why podcasting builds authority faster than any other medium. The next thing we need to look at is positioning your show for authority. Your podcast name and tagline should immediately signal expertise. Don't be cute, be clear. One of the podcasts I really love that did this incredibly well is a podcast called Grant CEO, right? And the it's called Grant CEO. Let me even search for it. It's called Grant CEO, and when you see it in like Grant CEO, go from Grant writer to Grant CEO. That's the tagline. And when you see it, you know who the podcast is for. And if someone who's a grant writer sees the podcast, they know what the transformation of the podcast would be. And so the podcast, you can check out the podcast Grant CEO by what's the name of this lady? I think June something. It's by Dear Rhonda Harrison. Yeah, Dear Rhonda Harrison. So it's Grant CEO, and it's Grant CEO. It says where experienced grant writers become CEOs. Very simple. You see the positioning? Grant CEO, where experienced grant writers become CEOs. So when I see that podcast, I know it's clear what the podcast is, who is for. Even though I'm not a grant writer, I know that, okay, this is the kind of person. I know the people to share this episode with. And if I'm a grant writer, I'm like, oh, wow. So this podcast is going to teach me how to become a grant business owner, a CEO. And it's clear and it's straightforward, right? So I know what to do. I don't have to be wondering, okay, where do I what's the podcast about? Who's the podcast for? Or what do you mean this is what the podcast covers? And all that. Okay. So the podcast name and tagline should immediately signal expertise. You want to be clear. Now, the niche down principle is, think of it this way. The marketing podcast positions you nowhere. Like marketing is broad and there's so many marketing podcasts. You're just another generic marketing podcast. What makes you special? Now you could do boring marketing. And so, or you do ad marketing. So you're doing marketing, but you're talking about ads, right? That's a way to niche down. And when you could also take it further and say the B2B SaaS growth show. Now, the B2B SaaS growth show. SaaS is software as a service. So what you're doing is you're a show that helps B2B softwares, SaaS, grow. It's very specific. I know what I mean for. I know who it's for, right? It's the audience know who the episode is made for. And the next thing you want to use to position yourself is your intro. The first 15 seconds, the listener should know who you are, who you serve, and what they will get from every episode. Okay? And then your opinion advantage. Authorities have opinions. You just don't want to share information. You want to share your perspective, take a stance, disagree with conventional wisdom where it makes sense for you. That's what makes you different. What's special about you. Okay? Now, a quick break. Building authority through podcasting is a long game, and having the right team makes all the difference. We help our clients position their shows for maximum impact, from naming and branding to content strategy and production. If you're serious about becoming the go-to expert in your space, book a free discovery call, link in the description. Okay, the next section is leveraging your podcast off platform. So most people just do the podcast and they post it, and it's on Apple, it's on Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcast. How did they say it? Right? And that's it. That's not enough. You want to leverage your podcast. You've worked on this content. You want to squeeze every last minute, every juice in it. Okay. So you leverage it. So how do you leverage it? Speaking engagement. So as head on is a credibility booster on every stage application. So you're a podcaster, you've been speaking, you talk, and people can go listen to you talk, address a topic, break down, teach, or give examples, share stories, and they can get a sense of the kind of speaker you are. And you can, with a podcast, if it's positioned well for search, if you've niched down well. When I mean niche down, you've positioned yourself, not just right. When people are looking for your kind of show, it's easy to find. And so if journalists, event organizers are like, okay, I'm looking for so an expert, they can easily search for you and find you online. And a podcast with 50 plus episodes tell them that you're serious, you're a consistent voice, you know what you're doing, you're an authority, you're not coming here to play and just starting, you've been in the game for a while. And then with book deals and publishing, right? Most times when you're working with publishers, they want to see if you have an audience, right? And many publishers, they look at your podcast audience as proof of market demand. So that's one way to leverage it, your podcast off platform. The other thing you could also look at is client conversations. Okay. So sometimes you're having conversation with clients, you say, okay, even before they get on the call, you can even send them an episode depending on the questions they fill in the form and say, well, yeah, actually I covered this in episode 34 of my podcast. You can listen to it, right? And they'll listen to it and you provide value, you build trust. And by the time they come on the call, they're pretty much closed already, right? You're not pitching, you're not referencing you, you're not referencing the offer, you're just making reference to your own body of work. Okay. And then the other thing is LinkedIn and social proof. When you share episode clips with your insights as the caption, it's out there that you're a thought leader, you're having conversations and people can go listen to the podcast for a deeper conversation. So you can leverage your podcast off platform. It can help you post content and show up consistently. Okay. And with the next thing is the authority content framework. So what is the authority content framework? The 4 episode types that build authority. Okay. So we have the thought leadership episodes. I probably should make this a standalone video of its own. And that's your original frameworks, your models, your opinions. Okay. The other one is case study episodes. It's your own case study, client success stories with real numbers, depending on the kind of case studies. You could even interview your own clients that got, so you're talking to them, leveraging their journey, and people are going to see your clients in them and want to work with you. So you don't even have to make sales because naturally, if you're interviewing your client and say, "Oh yeah, before you started working with me, what was it feeling like? Why did you even?" Right, you don't even have to make sales. Right? People who want to get that kind of results, they know that they need to work with you. The next thing is expert interview episodes. You're interviewing expert conversation with your peers and mentors, right? And then there's hot take episodes. You're responding to industry trends and news in real time. Okay. Now, of course, the rotation, you don't have to do just one. You can alternate between the 4 types. It gives your show a sense of variety while consistently reinforcing your expertise from different angles. Okay. Consistency is the compound factor. Publishing weekly for 12 months creates a body of work that no competitor can replicate with a single viral post. Okay. Now, authority isn't giving, it's built. And there's no faster way to build it than showing up every week with a podcast that delivers real value. If you want to launch or relaunch your podcast with authority positioning at the center of the strategy, let's talk. Book a free discovery call with our team. We'll build your roadmap together. The link is in the description. Subscribe and yay. See you next time.